Hey, what's up, my friend? Welcome to Project Unchained. I am Ross Lepola. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to watch this video. I appreciate you taking time. And I sincerely hope that you gain as much from listening to this video as I have from creating. In this video, I'm going to evolve a little bit from the last video. The last video I talked about the nice guy and what that looks like and kind of defining that, particularly as it applies to the romantic setting and the pursuit of a girlfriend or partner or something along those lines. So today we're going to talk about people-pleasing behaviors and people-pleasing tendencies. People-pleasing tendencies and behaviors are very similar to this nice guy role that I defined in the last video, but there's some subtle differences. So I wanted to talk about them in different contexts, different situations, even though they're very much, intertwined with one another. One of the ways that my people-pleasing behavior used to be really prevalent was there's a lot of times people would ask things of me and I had a really hard time saying no, even though I really wanted to say no and I meant to say no. I would agree to things just to avoid conflict. I would agree to those things, one, again, to avoid the conflict, two, because I didn't want that other person or persons to stop liking me because I said no. And I made all those choices out of fear. I made all those choices out of insecurity and lack of self-worth. That's a horrible place to be making choices from. So let's break that down. Let's start to unpack some of that stuff so that we can make choices that are not from that space of fear and not from that place of attacking your self-worth. Let's define people-pleasing behaviors and tendencies as we get started here first. People-pleasing behaviors and tendencies are those things that we participate in when we feel a strong urge to please other people at our own expense. And again, that's very similar to the nice guy definition and how we define that in the last video. One of the main differences is that the nice guy, those things are done from a romantic pursuit, where people-pleasing tendencies occur all over the map, whether it be at home, at work, other social networks, different things of that nature, but it's a lot more broad. A lot of nice guy mentality has the roots in these people-pleasing behaviors as well. So that's where there's that intermix and interlay between the two similar concepts, but slightly different. One of the things that I view people-pleasing tendencies as is it's a coping mechanism. We are in this place where we don't want to put in jeopardy the acceptance from the outside or this perceived acceptance from the outside. So we're not going to jeopardize that by saying no or by speaking our truth. And that is in that conflict avoidance. We don't want to create conflict between the other person for fear that it could damage the connection and relationship and thusly damage our own acceptance because now we don't have that person validating that acceptance. One of the reasons why that can be so damaging, when we avoid that conflict, what's happening then at that point is we're going to reluctantly do things. And when we do things from that state of being, we're going to have resentment. And when we have that resentment stored within us, we are going to undermine the foundation of that relation, whatever it is. So regardless of any of that acceptance, non-acceptance, self-worth stuff, when we do that, we undermine the ability for there to be a really good, healthy relationship between you and that other person. In addition to that, when we create that resentment and we do those things reluctantly, we are going to create our own inner turmoil. Anytime we say yes when we mean no, there's a part of us inside that's feeling that tear, that's feeling that lack of doing things because you want to be doing them. That's the cost. The cost is your own peace and being within you. That sucks. For years, that was my modus operandi. I did not enjoy it. And it took a long time for me to really gain the awareness and the conscious awareness that I was doing that in so many different places and areas in my life, unconscious, avoiding conflict around every corner. For a long time in my old profession, I didn't ask for a raise when I knew I was due one and deserved one, but I thought it would be confrontation, so I didn't ask. When I finally mustered up that courage after starting down this path of self-care and self-development, I finally spoke my truth, and I got that raise. So it's not just in relationship with your friend or your best friend or your partner. It also shows up at work. It creates limitations all over in your life. Those types of behaviors and tendencies shackle us. And like I've said before, that's why we're here. We need to break free from those limitations. We have to bring the awareness and cultivate the awareness to those patterns and behaviors that we're participating in that create those limitations in the first place. That awareness is that agent of change. That's how we start to realize, like, oh, I'm showing up like this and I'm avoiding the conflict. Who says there has to be conflict in the first place? Why can't I navigate this conversation in a professional way, in a compassionate way, in an empathetic way? It's just my fear that's projecting the conflict. And that's one of the things I started to realize as I started to step into that role and express myself in those ways. The conflict was all right here. I just made it up. It didn't actually exist. So we have to be aware of that too. I projected that from my own mental imagery onto creating this reality that didn't actually exist. It was just that imagination. And our imaginations can be super powerful in really positive ways, or in this case, really limiting. When we bring that awareness to it, that's when we can start to create some shift and change. Now, one of the things I wanted to point out within this lens, because there's a lot of things in our culture that encourage sacrifice, and particularly like for parents sacrificing things in their life for their children and different things of that. There's a massive difference between people-pleasing behavior and sacrifice. There is a very different energy in doing things from a place of reluctance and doing things from that, I'm going to do this just because it'll avoid conflict and it won't piss anybody off, to, you know what, I don't need to have the whole cookie, I can share, or something along those lines. But we're not indulging or doing all the things. We're choosing to share, we're choosing to sacrifice where normally maybe I would have had the whole thing. We're choosing to sacrifice our free time to be with our kids. Anybody that's gone from non-kid life to kid life knows that there's a lot of sacrifices that come with that. A lot of things in your landscape of your life change and shift in that moment. So it's important to recognize the key difference between doing something from a place of reluctancy and doing something from a people-pleasing behavior standpoint to choosing to sacrifice because that's something that you want to participate in. Very different. The key is choice, and that brings a very different energy. Whether we want to really be aware of it or not, or label it as such, we have a subtle understanding and subtle awareness to that. We're on the receiving end of that by somebody doing it reluctantly or somebody choosing to do that, help us along the way. And thinking about it, again, back to some of my own experiences to hopefully help make it relatable for you. There is a hurdle for me that I had to figure out how to jump over to get past these types of behaviors and these types of tendencies. The biggest thing was realizing that these people-pleasing tendencies and behaviors doesn't gain me the approval or acceptance or anything of that nature from people on the outside. People-pleasing behaviors don't gain that because there's that energy behind it again. So somebody on the receiving end of my people-pleasing tendencies and behaviors knew that, and they could feel that. And they would either distance themselves because that's not what they want to be associated with, or they would see it and use it to their advantage. All that linked to me needing to learn to like and accept myself rather than avoid the conflict and avoid pissing people off. And there's going to be times where we upset each other and we have to learn to navigate that. That's okay. What's not okay is in that space where we create inner conflict to avoid the outer conflict. That will go with you so many different places. It's way easier to resolve that outer conflict than it is that inner conflict. So when we give ourselves away to create that inner conflict, guess what? That comes with us every place we walk through the rest of the day. Whereas if there's the outer conflict and you can't create resolution in that immediate moment, you don't have to carry it with you the rest of the day or the rest of the week or the rest of the month, but you can create some resolution with it. Not that you can't create resolution to internal conflict, but that can be a lot harder because when we do that and we create that internal conflict, there is so much more to unpack and understand to create that resolution. Particularly because a lot of times when we do that and participate in that behavior, there was not going to be any conflict in the first place. So by doing that, by avoiding the fear of external conflict, and we create that internal conflict, there was no conflict in the first place. We contributed to that. I've talked about that before. Like, what are we contributing to? What are the things that we do that create our experience? That was creating internal conflict, and it's unnecessary. We don't have to live in that state. My challenge for you all just to think about that. Sit with it. Reflect on your life and consider where you may be participating in some of those people-pleasing tendencies. And think about, what can you do differently? How can you participate in those moments, in those events differently that allow you to create a different experience and create a different outcome than that internal conflict that creates a lot of weight and tension and takes away from our joy and meaning. And as we unfold through that challenge and we start to connect with some of those things, I got 2 more videos in this little series to come that I think will really start to help paint a bigger, broader picture and really empower us all to be able to step forward in a more authentic way. So please be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel, share this with your friends. I hope to see you all later. Let's get unchained.